I'm going to show you how to use acorn to create your own graffiti word if you're choosing to do it digitally instead of by hand. Start by opening up acorn, selecting new image. Your preset is US letter. Click OK. Click the green button so that it's just my sheet of paper. Click on image, rotate canvas. Either one of these, you'll get the same result. And this allows me to space my letters. I can make my word as big as possible without having to pile my letters awkwardly. Click on your text tool and click and drag to make a text box that's slightly smaller than the sheet of paper. When you release, your cursor will automatically start blinking up here so you can start typing. I'm going to use the word art. My kerning right now is set to -48, which is why this is, if you look at it up close, this is a pile of letters. So if I select those and I adjust the kerning so that it's 0 or higher, you'll get some space between your letters. So kerning is a word that refers to the space between letters. Mine happened for some reason to be set at -48. And this is very small. This is size 18 font. We want to work much larger for this art project. So I'm going to select it, and I'm going to go at least probably 350. Gives me nice big letters to work with so that when it prints, I have a big space to paint in. I'm not going to be painting in a teeny tiny little word. You can also change the style, and it previews for you as you scroll. You may want to change it to the font first before you adjust the size. Any font works. I wouldn't recommend starting with something that is too decorative. You may want to keep it kind of simple. I'm actually going to use the marker one, would be kind of cool. So I'm going to do this to begin with. And we also want to change these letters so that they're white on the inside and have a black stroke or a black outline going on the outside. Right now I have a black fill with a white stroke. Hitting this button allows me to swap colors. So right now I have a white fill, and if I had a stroke it would be black. But if you look over here, my stroke is set to 0, which means I don't see anything. If I click on it, I can use the sliding bar to make it a black outline. For the sake of what you're doing today, for actually designing your graffiti word, I don't recommend doing something really large. I know it looks cool, but you can always add that big dark outline later. I would start with, I wouldn't go higher than 10. This will work just fine. Once you've done all those steps so that you don't have to do it again later if you make a lot of mistakes or you don't like what you do, I'm going to go to this, and I'm going to duplicate a layer. So now I have 2. And I'm going to title this Do Not Edit. And I'm going to lock it. And it doesn't really matter where it's arranged. And I'm going to turn it off also. This is really just here, so I can do a ton of different things to this, and if I don't like it, I have a backup that I don't need to go through all those steps again. So I'm going to be working on this layer, and now I'm going to show you how to take this and make it look a little more exaggerated and a little more graffiti-like. If you're doing this, I would pause at this point and go in, open up a document, and get yourself to this point before you watch the next part. So, to edit this and funkify it and make it look like graffiti, I'm going to select it first. I'm going to go to Shape, Bezier Stuff, Convert Bezier to Shape. When I click this, watch what happens to my letters. They get, if I zoom in here, something called anchor points. All these little white boxes that you see are anchor points. And if for some reason you click off and the anchor points go away, you can get them back by selecting your word with the selection tool and simply clicking on the pen tool. This is your Bezier tool or your pen tool. It's the same thing. You can also click P on your keyboard if you like shortcuts. P is the shortcut to pull up the pen tool. P for pen. And now a couple things about the anchor points. You can move them. So if you come over here and you click on Select Tool, you can select it. So notice it turns gray when it's selected. And you can move it. So I'm moving just that one anchor point. So it's not changing a lot about my letter. You're just moving one anchor point at a time. You can also pull on handles. So if we zoom in really close to what I'm doing, you'll see that there's, I'm going to get even closer for you. You'll see that there's the anchor point, which is the square, and there are the handles, which are these little circles. If I click the anchor point, it adjusts where the bump or the curve is happening. If I click the handles and pull, it adjusts what happens to the curve, and the direction of the curve. So there's 3 different things you can play around with. You can play around with where the anchor point is. You can play around with the handles to adjust the direction and the size of the curve. You can also delete them. So for instance, if you don't want this bump here, you can click on it, hit delete, and now you have this anchor point connected directly to this one. So that'll be kind of a fun thing to play around with. The other option, and I'll show you how this can attribute to being a graffiti word in a few minutes. The other option underneath here, so that was anchor select. The other option is to reset the anchor point. So if you click on that, you get a different looking cursor. And what that allows you to do basically is turn the point from being rounded to being sharp. So I'll use this here. If I click on it, actually that's not a good example. Let's use this one right here. If I click on it, it can go from being sharp. No, I need to find one that gives you a good idea of what this does. Here we go. You can kind of see it change. You might be able to see it better. You can basically make it from being a curve, if I click on it again, to being a pointed line. So if I click and drag, it turns into a curve. If I click on it, it turns into a point. So that's the reset tool. Depending on what you're planning on doing, you may want to use this. If you want to move the anchor points, you have to go back to the select tool in order to be able to move them. Now, if you look what's happening here, multiple points are moving at once because multiple points were selected. So, for instance, if I select click, hold shift, click, hold shift, click, you'll notice all 3 of these are selected, and if I go back to move them, they're all going to move at once. So you can select by holding shift, you can select more than one point at a time to move them around. What I'm going to do right now, just to show you how you can use this to make it look a little more graffiti-ish, I'm going to use both of those things, the select tool and the reset tool, to exaggerate the bottom of my A. Graffiti artists oftentimes really exaggerate the size of the tops and bottoms and insides of their letters. So I'm going to click, I get my anchor points. I want to reset this from being a point, which it is right now, to being rounded. So I'm going to come over here to, unfortunately there's no shortcuts. I'm going to come over here, click on it, and pull to make it rounded. And I'm also going to delete a few of these points. So you need to be on the selection tool. I'm going to delete this. I want to make it a much more clean, rounded shape. And I think I'm going to delete this one too. And I'm going to use the selection tool to really exaggerate. And this is still at a point. Notice how so I'm using this to really emphasize the size of the curves. And I'm going to probably do it to this side too. So I'm going to delete a bunch of these. And I'll show you also what adding, if we add anchor points, does. And I'm going to use selection tool again to come through and really emphasize the type of curve that's here. Right now, so you can probably start to see how we get a little bit more of a, I need to get a little closer to see where the other handle is. It's right here, that little circle. You can see this, how you can kind of use it if I zoom out to start creating the illusion of a bit more graffiti style font. Really exaggerated, rounded tops and bottoms, and sort of exaggeratedly small insides of letters.